A single dad hanging by a thread loses his job just days before Christmas. No paycheck, no presents, no hope. But when he helps a stranger whose car is stuck in the snow, he has no idea she's one of the richest women in the city. She offers him something no resume ever could, a second chance, a new beginning, and maybe love. But can he trust that it's real? Or is this just another fairy tale that will melt away like snow? Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The wind cut through the town like it had something to prove, bitter and unrelenting, as it whipped between rusted street signs and hollow alleyways. Snow flurries danced beneath the gray December sky, not enough to cover the ground, just enough to sting the skin. On Main Street, the holiday lights blinked in half-hearted defiance against the cold, strung between light poles like they were trying too hard to feel festive. Noah Graves zipped Lila's coat higher, tucking her scarf around her neck with trembling fingers. The thrifted zipper jammed halfway up, but he didn't have time to wrestle with it. They were already late, again. "Daddy, your face is red," Lila said, her voice muffled by her scarf. She was 8, with oversized gloves that swallowed her hands and boots that didn't match. Her cheeks were raw from the cold, but she was smiling, because she always smiled, even when she shouldn't have to. Noah managed a weak grin. "Just the wind, kiddo. Let's keep moving." He gripped her hand and led her down the sidewalk past the bakery with its glowing windows and warm smell of cinnamon rolls they couldn't afford. His eyes flicked to the "Help Wanted" sign in the window, but he didn't stop. They'd already said no once. No experience, too old, not the right vibe. His stomach was empty, but it was the kind of hunger he'd grown used to. As long as Lila ate, he could keep going. They reached the bus stop just as it pulled away. Noah muttered a curse under his breath, but not loud enough for her to hear. Lila tugged his hand gently. "It's okay, Daddy. We can wait for the next one." He looked down at her, this tiny person who still believed everything would work out because she hadn't seen enough of the world to think otherwise. He wished he could wrap her in something stronger than this fraying coat. He wished he could give her the Christmas she deserved. Instead, he had $7 to his name and a pink slip folded in his back pocket. It was December 21st. He'd just been fired. Rent was due in 11 days, Christmas was in 4, and he had no idea how to save either. The wind howled through the empty streets. The hardware store window was frosted over with artificial snow, a desperate attempt to look cheerful. Inside, rows of shiny tools hung in neat, proud displays. Chrome wrenches, cordless drills, heavy-duty torque sets. Noah stared through the glass for a moment, his jaw tight, breath clouding in the air. He used to dream of owning a shop like this. Now he was walking in to sell the last thing he hadn't already lost. He stepped inside, the warmth hitting him like a slap. The man behind the counter, Donnie, a gray-haired ex-mechanic who used to drink with Noah's father, barely looked up. "You're late," Donnie muttered. Noah didn't answer. He set the toolbox on the counter. It was scratched and dented, with a faded sticker on the side that read, "Lila's Dad's Magic Box," in a child's handwriting. Donnie opened the lid and let out a low whistle. "You sure about this?" Noah nodded. "How much?" Donnie hesitated, eyes scanning the contents, specialty ratchets, a torque wrench, a socket set that had cost Noah 2 weeks' wages back when he could afford to think long-term. "Best I can do's 50. You'd get more if you sold 'em online." "I don't have time to wait," Noah said flatly. "Cash?" Donnie grunted, counting bills out of a lockbox. Noah didn't look at them. His eyes were on the pink mittens in the display next door. $11.99, fuzzy-lined, the kind Lila had asked for when she saw them on a girl at school. She'd smiled and said, "It's okay, mine work fine," pulling her sleeves down to cover her bare fingers. They didn't work fine. Her hands were red and chapped, and she'd stopped holding snow too long because it hurt. Noah took the money, shoved it in his pocket, and walked back into the cold. His hands trembled, not from the weather, but from the weight of what he'd just done. That toolbox had seen him through 10 winters, 5 jobs, and every oil change he'd ever done on the side to make ends meet. Now it was gone, but he bought the mittens, pink and soft and lined with fake fur. He folded them into a paper bag and carried them like something fragile. Because in a way they were. The machines were still humming when the floor manager called Noah into the office. Third shift was winding down, the smell of oil and burnt rubber clinging to everything. Noah wiped his hands on his coveralls and glanced at the clock. 6:13 a.m. He'd been on his feet for 10 hours. All he wanted was to punch out, grab a coffee, and get home before Lila woke up. But the look on Brian's face stopped him cold. The office was small, crammed with filing cabinets, and a desk that hadn't been cleaned since the Bush administration. Brian didn't look up right away. He fidgeted with a pen, clicked it twice, then folded his hands like he was practicing for a funeral. "Noah, sit." Noah stayed standing. "Everything okay?" Brian exhaled through his nose. "Listen, man, corporate's making cuts. With the holiday downtime and all, they're trimming labor. It's not performance. You've been solid. It's just—" "How many?" Noah asked, his voice flat. Brian blinked. "You're the first." Noah stared at him. "You mean the only?" Brian looked uncomfortable. "They told me to start with part-time and temp contracts. You're on file as flex scheduled, so—" "Because I had to take mornings off when my kid got sick," Noah snapped. "I gave this place everything, worked weekends, filled in every time someone didn't show. I trained your new hires." Brian winced. "I know. I tried to fight it. But there's no severance, just your last check. They said it'll be direct deposited." Noah laughed, but it didn't sound like a laugh. Of course. He stood there for a long second. The hum of the factory outside went on like nothing had changed, like the world didn't just tilt under his feet. "I've got a kid, Brian," he said, his voice quieter now. "Rent due. Christmas in 4 days." Brian rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm sorry." Noah looked around the office one last time. The crooked Employee of the Month plaques, the half-dead plant, the cheap coffee machine that always made the break room smell like burnt hope. Then he walked out. No punch-out, no goodbye, just one less name on the roster. The apartment was cold. Not freezing, but cold enough that Lila wore her jacket inside and didn't question it. The heater had been wheezing for 2 weeks, and Noah hadn't had the time, or the money, to call anyone about it. He set the grocery bag on the counter with practiced care, pulling out a loaf of white bread, a can of soup, and a small carton of eggs. That was it. $13 gone. Lila sat cross-legged on the living room floor, drawing on the back of a cereal box with one of her broken crayons. She looked up, hopeful. "Did they have the cookies?" Noah forced a smile. "They were all out, kiddo. Must be a holiday rush." Lila's face fell for a second, but she nodded, accepting it with that quiet kind of grace that broke Noah's heart more than any tantrum would have. "It's okay," she said. "I'll ask Santa." He turned away too quickly, pretending to check the soup label. He hated lying, but he hated the idea of her worrying even more. "Soup for dinner?" he asked. She grinned. "Yes, can we toast the bread too?" "You bet." He swallowed the lump in his throat. While it simmered, he slipped into the bathroom and locked the door. Turned on the sink so she wouldn't hear him breathe hard. The mirror didn't lie. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble he couldn't afford to shave with a busted razor, and something else. That look men get when the weight starts to pull at the corners of their soul. He couldn't tell her he got fired. Not yet. She still believed in Santa Claus and good people. He didn't want to be the one to make the world smaller for her. When he came back out, Lila had set the table. 2 chipped plates. A folded napkin on each one, like they were expecting company. He almost lost it right there. Instead, he sat down and toasted the bread. "It's going to be a great Christmas," he said softly. She beamed at him, eyes wide with trust. He didn't believe it, but she did, and that was enough for tonight. The toy store wasn't much, just a cramped little shop tucked between a shuttered diner and a pawn shop with bars on the windows. But its display window glittered like something from a Christmas card. Strings of colored lights blinked above plastic snow, and a toy train chugged in circles behind the glass. Lila pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass. "There he is," she whispered. Noah followed her gaze to the small stuffed penguin sitting in the middle of a faux iceberg, a red scarf stitched around its neck, and two oversized button eyes that somehow looked curious and kind. It was $10. He knew that already. They'd passed this store 3 times this week, and every time Lila stopped to say hello to it like it was a friend she hadn't met yet. Noah checked his wallet, a 5, crumpled and worn, and some change rattling loose in his coat pocket. That was it. He looked down at her, her cheeks flushed with cold and hope. She didn't ask. She never did. But he saw it in her eyes, the longing, and the way she tucked it away so it wouldn't make him feel bad. She deserved more than this, more than waiting outside windows and pretending dreams didn't cost money. He pushed the door open. A bell jingled overhead, the warmth inside wrapping around them like a soft blanket. Lila stayed by the window, watching the penguin. At the counter, a woman in a knit sweater smiled politely. "Looking for something last minute?" Noah nodded, keeping his voice low. "The penguin in the window. How much?" "10. He held up the $5 bill and placed 3 quarters and a dime next to it. His voice cracked. "This is all I have." The woman looked at the money, then at him, then at Lila by the window. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded. "I think he's been on sale." Noah exhaled, barely managing a thank you. When he stepped back outside, he handed the paper bag to Lila. She gasped, pulling out the penguin with trembling fingers. "Daddy, how?" He smiled, blinking hard against the wind. "Santa's helpers come in all kinds." She hugged it to her chest, eyes shining, and for one quiet moment the world felt okay. The wind picked up again as Noah stepped off the curb, Lila clutching his gloved hand with her new penguin nestled in the crook of her arm. The paper bag rustled with each gust, and Noah instinctively shielded her from the cold. The streetlights flickered overhead, their yellow glow spilling across wet pavement. Most of the shops were already closing, their doors locked, their owners headed home to warmth and dinner, and lights strung around Christmas trees. But across the street, just out of the halo of the light, someone watched. She stood still, almost like she'd been carved from the night itself, a long red coat buttoned up to her chin and dark curls falling loose around her face. The wind caught her scarf and tugged it sideways, but she didn't move. Her eyes followed Noah and Lila, not with suspicion, not even pity. It was something else. Curiosity, or maybe recognition. From where she stood, she'd seen it all. The way the man had stepped into the store with nothing but worn boots and a slouched posture that told stories no words ever could. The way the clerk had hesitated, then nodded. The way the little girl's eyes lit up like something sacred when he handed her that bag. It wasn't just the toy, it was the act. A man with nothing giving his everything just to see his daughter smile. Vivian Hartwell didn't believe in coincidences, not anymore. She'd come into town for solitude, not sentiment. But what she saw there, it pulled at something old and buried, something she hadn't felt in years. As Noah crossed the street toward the bus stop, she noticed the limp in his left leg. Slight, but there. She noticed how his coat didn't quite zip at the bottom, and how he gave Lila the dry side of the bench to sit on, standing beside her in the wind. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket, thumb hovering over the screen, then stopped. Not yet. Instead, she turned and disappeared into the dark like a whisper, the red of her coat the last thing the night swallowed. The apartment was quieter than usual that morning, the kind of quiet that made even the hum of the fridge feel loud. Lila was still asleep, curled beneath her threadbare blanket, The stuffed penguin nestled beside her like it was guarding her dreams. Noah moved quietly, slipping his boots on near the door, trying not to wake her. He had no work to go to, just another day of walking around town, pretending like something might turn up. The same coat, the same boots, the same weight in his chest. He grabbed the grocery bag he'd reused as his daily carry-all and slung it over his shoulder. But something felt different. He paused, hand brushing against something foreign inside the bag. He reached in, expecting maybe a crumpled receipt or one of Lila's drawings. Instead, he pulled out an envelope. No name, no return address. Just his own first name written in a neat looping script. Inside, 2 things. 3 crisp $100 bills and a note. You're a good man. The world doesn't always reward that, but some of us still notice. Merry Christmas. Noah stared at it for a long time, his throat closing. His first instinct was disbelief, then anger, then shame. He hadn't asked for charity. He'd made it a point never to. He didn't know who had done it, maybe the clerk at the toy store, maybe someone who'd watched him without him knowing, but it didn't matter. Someone had seen him struggle, and worse, someone had stepped in. He couldn't keep it, not because he wasn't desperate, he was, but because something in him, some old hardwired sense of dignity, couldn't take money that didn't come from work, from sweat, from his own hands. That afternoon, he walked back to the toy store. The clerk was sweeping the floor. "Someone left this in my bag yesterday," he said quietly, placing the envelope on the counter. "If it was you, thank you, but I can't keep it." She blinked at the bills, shook her head slowly. "Wasn't me." He left it anyway. Back out in the wind, he zipped his coat tight. His fingers were shaking again, but not from the cold this time, from the feeling of being seen. The sky turned silver by late afternoon, the kind of heavy December gray that makes everything look colder than it already is. Snow started to fall in lazy, drifting flakes, catching on windowsills and melting before it could settle. In the apartment, the heat still sputtered now and then, but never quite warmed the corners. Noah lit the stove just to take the edge off and set a dented kettle on the burner. Lila was curled on the couch, wrapped in the same fleece blanket she'd had since she was 4. The penguin was in her lap, one wing tucked beneath her arm like it belonged there. She was coloring again, tongue poking out slightly between her teeth, focused in a way only kids can be when they're trying to keep the world simple. Noah stirred a packet of instant hot chocolate into 2 chipped mugs, the last ones they had. He used water instead of milk. There hadn't been any in the fridge since Thursday, but Lila never complained. When he handed her the mug, her eyes lit up like he'd brought her something far more precious. "Thanks, Daddy," she said, blowing on it gently before taking a careful sip. He sat beside her, their legs touching. She leaned into him without a word, resting her head against his arm. He reached into his coat pocket and felt the envelope again, soft and thin between his fingers. It was still there. Still real. $300 and a note that haunted him more than it comforted him. "You're a good man." The words had burrowed somewhere deep, where pride and shame tangled into something too complicated to name. He could have used it. They needed groceries, rent, real heat. But spending it would feel like something had been taken from him, some part of himself that refused to be bought, even with kindness. So he tucked the envelope into a small box in the back of the kitchen drawer, beneath some old photos and a key to a storage unit he hadn't paid on in months. Out of sight, not out of mind. Lila looked up at him. "Do you think it'll snow on Christmas?" Noah smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I hope so, sweetheart," he said. "I really hope so." Noah stared at the envelope like it was ticking. It had arrived that morning, no stamp, no return address, just slid beneath the door like a secret. Inside was a card, thick and embossed, with an address scrawled in elegant cursive and a short message that didn't make any sense. "Mr. Graves, we'd like to meet with you regarding a private opportunity. Discretion appreciated." He turned it over again. No company logo, no title, Just the date and time. Today, 3 o'clock p.m. The clock on the microwave blinked 1:42. He sat at the edge of the kitchen chair, the same one with the wobbly leg he kept forgetting to fix, and rubbed the stubble on his jaw. He hadn't shaved in a week. His best shirt was wrinkled beyond hope, and his boots were still crusted with salt from the last snow. It didn't feel real. It felt like a prank, or worse, a scam. People like him didn't get private invitations. People like him filled out online forms and never heard back. But his stomach was empty, and Lila's mittens had a hole in one thumb already. So he went. The bus ride was quiet, the seats half empty. He kept checking the address, thinking maybe he'd copied it wrong. But when he got off on the edge of town, the map pointed him straight through a row of tall pines and toward a long, gated drive. He walked the rest of the way. By the time the mansion came into view, he thought maybe he'd hallucinated it. The estate stretched wide across snow-dusted hills, windows tall and glowing warm like something out of a painting. The iron gate creaked open on its own, and a man in a dark coat greeted him at the door with nothing more than a polite nod. "This way, Mr. Graves." Noah followed, boots squeaking on marble floors, heart pounding in a rhythm he hadn't felt since the night he held Lila for the first time. He didn't know who was behind the invitation. He didn't know why he was here. But desperation had a way of making a man walk straight into the unknown and hope, just hope, that it wasn't a mistake. The house was too quiet. Noah stood just inside the foyer, trying not to look like he didn't belong, even though every inch of him screamed it. The floors gleamed like water, reflecting the chandelier above, an enormous swirl of glass and light that probably cost more than his entire year's rent. The air smelled like pine and something citrusy, delicate and expensive. Even the silence had weight here. He shifted his feet, trying not to leave salt stains on the polished floor. His boots felt wrong. His coat felt wrong. He felt wrong. Footsteps echoed from the hall, and then he saw her, the woman in the red coat. Vivian Hartwell didn't look like someone who ran empires, even though her name was on real estate signs all over the county. She wasn't tall or severe. She didn't wear diamond-studded confidence like some rich people did. She wore a gray sweater, dark jeans, and a look that was hard to read, somewhere between curiosity and calm. "You returned the envelope," she said without any hint of accusation. Noah stared. You left that money?" She nodded. "I did." He frowned. "Why?" Vivian tilted her head, studying him. "Because I saw what you did. The toy store, your daughter. Most people would have kept the envelope." "I'm not most people," he said too quickly, too sharp. "I know," she replied. "That's why you're here." He didn't speak for a moment. His hands tightened into fists at his sides. "I don't know what you want from me, but I'm not a project. I don't need saving." Vivian's expression didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to save you, Mr. Graves. I'm offering you a job." That caught him off guard. "What kind of job?" "Groundskeeping, general maintenance, helping my staff prepare the property for a holiday event. It's temporary. Modest pay, housing included. No strings." Noah narrowed his eyes. "Why me?" "Because I trust my gut. And I saw the way you looked at your daughter when you handed her that penguin." He swallowed hard, the edge softening. She gestured toward the back window, where the snow-covered garden stretched toward the tree line. "You can say no, but I hope you don't." He didn't move. But something in his chest, something he hadn't felt in weeks, began to shift. Noah followed Vivian down a long hallway lined with old oil paintings and tall windows that looked out onto a frozen garden. Everything about the estate whispered wealth, but not in the loud, showy way. It was quiet money, generational. The kind that didn't need to announce itself because it had already written the names on the buildings. They stepped into a smaller sitting room, cozy despite its size. A fire crackled behind a glass screen, and books filled the walls like insulation. Vivian motioned for him to sit, but he didn't. He stood by the doorway, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, shoulders hunched like he expected the roof to fall in. "I know this is strange," she said, folding her legs beneath her on the chair, "but I want to be clear. I'm not here to pity you." "You left money in my bag," he said. "I did," she admitted, "and you returned it. That told me everything I needed to know." He shook his head. "You don't know me." Vivian leaned forward slightly. "I know you're a man who gave away his last few dollars so his daughter could have one moment of joy this Christmas. I know you didn't take help when it was handed to you. I know you carry more weight than anyone should have to." He looked away. The firelight danced in his eyes, but the warmth didn't reach them. "You said something about a job," he muttered. "I need someone to tend the property, salt the walks, shovel snow, hang lights, small repairs. My usual caretaker retired last spring, and this place is a lot for one person." He narrowed his eyes. "Why not hire a professional crew?" "I don't want a crew," she said softly. "I want someone who pays attention, someone who doesn't cut corners, someone like you." He laughed under his breath, bitter and sharp. "You're offering a handyman gig based on a toy store moment?" "I'm offering a job," she said. "Not charity, not a handout, just a chance." He looked at her for a long time. Something about her voice, steady, unbothered, not condescending, disarmed him more than any check ever could. "Room included?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Cottage at the back of the property. Utilities covered. Start tomorrow?" He paused, then gave a slight nod. For the first time in weeks he didn't feel like he was drowning, not saved, not rescued, but like maybe, just maybe, he could swim. The next morning, frost painted the world in silver. Noah stood beneath a bare sycamore on the south lawn, staring up at the tangled mess of Christmas lights in his hands. They looked like they hadn't been touched in years, half the bulbs dull, the wires knotted like a cruel joke. He exhaled slowly, his breath rising like smoke in the cold. Somewhere behind him, the estate loomed with its brick towers and quiet grace. A place that felt too clean, too untouchable. But this was the job, and he'd said yes. Vivian hadn't been around this morning, just a note left on the kitchen counter in tidy script. "Start with the lights. Party is on the 24th. Coffee's in the thermos." She didn't hover, didn't supervise. That unsettled him more than it should have. Noah set the thermos down on the porch railing and surveyed the task ahead. Dozens of trees lined the drive. Wreaths needed to go up. Garland, lights across the gables. He'd decorated apartments before, cheap string lights from dollar stores, maybe a paper snowflake or two in the window. But this was something else entirely. An event, a production, a stage he didn't belong on. He got to work anyway. His fingers moved through the tangles with practiced care, the same patience he used to fix busted vacuum lines and warped brake pads. He tested bulbs, replaced fuses, climbed ladders that wobbled more than he liked. By mid-morning, his jacket was unzipped, and his breath came in visible huffs as he strung lights along the eastern balcony. His body ached, but the ache felt earned, different. He was halfway through wrapping garland around a front column when he heard a voice behind him. "You're efficient." He turned. Vivian stood at the bottom of the steps, her red coat open to reveal a simple gray sweater, her hands tucked in her pockets. "Just doing the job," Noah replied, wiping sweat from his brow with a gloved hand. She nodded once, eyes scanning the work he'd done. "It looks good, really good." He shrugged. "I've got a kid who loves Christmas. Learned a few tricks." Her smile was soft, real. As she walked back inside, Noah paused and looked up at the twinkling line of lights above him. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like he was trying to build something for someone else. It felt like he was building something that mattered. The cottage at the back of the estate was small, but warm. The heater worked. The water ran clear, and for the first time in weeks, Noah didn't wake up with frost biting at his toes. Lila had taken to it like it was a castle. She explored every corner, named every room, and immediately claimed the sunlit nook by the window as her reading spot. On their third morning there, While Noah was out stringing lights on the back hedge, Lila stood on her tiptoes to see through the cottage's kitchen window. She had just finished brushing the penguin's imaginary fur and decided he needed air. She tugged open the back door and stepped out into the snow, boots crunching softly with each step. She didn't mean to wander far, just far enough to catch the drifting snowflakes. But curiosity pulled her forward, right up to the main house, where a wide kitchen window framed a view into something that looked more like a movie than real life. Shiny countertops, a glass bowl full of oranges, and a woman moving quietly through it, humming under her breath. Vivian glanced up, mid-slice of an apple, and caught the sight of Lila staring in through the glass. Most children would have run, but Lila stood still, perfectly calm, like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Vivian opened the back door and stepped out into the cold. "You must be Lila," she said. Lila nodded. "You're the lady with the pretty house." Vivian smiled. "You think it's pretty?" "Not just the house. The inside smells like cinnamon. It smells kind." Vivian blinked, caught off guard by the strange poetry of it. "Would you like to come in and see it?" Lila hesitated. "Is that okay? My dad says not to bother people." "You're not a bother, you're a guest." Inside, Lila wandered slowly, taking in every polished detail. She didn't touch anything, just looked, eyes wide. Then, without warning, she turned to Vivian and said, "My daddy's trying real hard. I just thought you should know." Vivian knelt, meeting her gaze. "I can see that." Lila smiled. "He doesn't think people notice." Vivian's voice softened. "Well, I do." And for a moment in that bright, quiet kitchen, two strangers who shouldn't have had anything in common stood in perfect wordless understanding. The invitation came in the form of a knock. Noah opened the cottage door to find Vivian standing there, a casserole dish wrapped in a striped towel and the faintest hint of nervousness in her eyes. The sky behind her was a dark velvet, and snow had started to fall again, soft, slow, endless. "I made too much," she said, lifting the dish slightly. "Thought you and Lila might be hungry." Noah glanced over his shoulder. The tiny stove had a dented pot of instant noodles bubbling over. Lila was at the table, coloring in the same book she'd brought from their apartment, humming quietly to herself. He looked back at Vivian. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said gently, "but I wanted to." Something about her voice disarmed him, not the words, but the way she said them. No pity, no performance, just honesty. He stepped aside. "Come in, then." Vivian entered like she belonged there, which she didn't, not really, but she made it seem like she did. She set the dish on the table, unwrapped the towel, and revealed a baked pasta that filled the whole cottage with the smell of tomatoes, garlic, and melted cheese. Lila's eyes lit up. "You cooked that?" "I did," Vivian smiled. "Do you like lasagna?" "It smells like a dream," Lila said, already reaching for a plate. Noah sat quietly, watching them. The way Vivian leaned in to listen when Lila spoke. The way she laughed, not politely but fully, when Lila told her about the penguin's adventures in Snowland. It felt like something out of place, like a holiday card someone else was meant to be in. He ate in silence, eyes flicking between them. Vivian never once tried to pry into his life, never asked about his job or his story, or what kind of man ends up a guest in the house behind the house. She just passed the bread, listened, and laughed when Lila said something ridiculous about penguins knowing karate. When dinner ended, Lila hugged Vivian without hesitation, arms wrapped tight. "Thanks for making food that doesn't come from a box," she said. Vivian held her a little longer than most would. "You're welcome, sweetheart." After she left, Noah stood at the window for a long time, watching her coat disappear into the falling snow. He didn't know what this was, but it scared him in ways he wasn't ready to admit. The library was hidden at the far end of the estate, behind a pair of doors so heavy they groaned when pushed. Vivian led the way, a cup of tea in her hands, her pace slower than usual, as if unsure whether Noah would follow. He did silently, boots scuffing the polished floor. Inside it smelled of old paper and cedar. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, packed with hardcover novels and leather-bound volumes that looked older than both of them. A fireplace crackled in the corner, its light casting shadows that danced along the spines of the books. "I don't let many people in here," Vivian said softly. Setting her tea on a side table, Noah stepped in cautiously, hands in his coat pockets, eyes tracing the shelves. "You read all of these?" "Most," she smiled. "The ones worth reading twice are near the fireplace." He smirked. "That why the Dickens is half falling apart?" She turned, surprised. "You like Dickens?" He shrugged. "Used to, before life got loud." Vivian leaned against the edge of a reading chair, the firelight painting her in warm amber tones. "I used to hide in books," she said more to herself than him. "When my parents argued, when the nannies rotated out like clockwork, stories felt safer than real people." Noah walked over to the shelf and pulled out a worn copy of Great Expectations. "This one got me through a lot of nights in high school." "What was it?" she asked. "Pip's misery? Or the idea that maybe people can change?" "Both," he said, flipping it open and reading a line he already knew by heart. "It's comforting, thinking even a poor kid with nothing can end up in a better place, if someone sees something in him." She looked at him then, really looked. "I saw that the first day I watched you in the snow," she said. Noah cleared his throat, suddenly uncomfortable. "Don't romanticize it. I was broke and buying a penguin with my last $5. "That's exactly why it mattered." For a moment neither of them spoke. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. "Didn't think I'd spend my Friday night talking about Dickens in a mansion library." She grinned. "Didn't think I'd let a man with calloused hands and salt-stained boots in here either." He met her gaze, the fire crackling between them, but neither one looked away. The hardware store bell jingled as Noah stepped inside, a gust of cold air trailing behind him. He pulled his hood down and stomped the snow from his boots, nodding to Donnie behind the counter. He hadn't come for anything specific, just a few nails, maybe new gloves, but mostly he needed to be out of the estate, out of the quiet, the kind of quiet that starts asking questions you don't want to answer. He grabbed what he needed and made his way toward the register, but the murmurs stopped him halfway there. "I'm just saying," a voice said, low but not low enough. "You really think she's serious? A woman like that? Come on." Noah froze behind an aisle of de-icers and windshield scrapers. "Vivian Hartwell's had a dozen guys sniffing around her for years," another man said. "Lawyers, CEOs, hell, even a state senator. Now suddenly she's got some broke handyman living on her property? It's a game." Noah's stomach twisted. The voices were familiar, local guys. One worked over at the garage, the other ran the plow in winter. He'd nodded to them 100 times, shared coffees, advice, silence, small-town camaraderie. "She probably thinks it's cute," the first man said. "Like fixing up a stray, let him feel needed for a while, then, snap, door closes. Back to real life." Noah stepped into view. Both men shut up instantly, their bodies tensing, like they'd been caught stealing. "You got something you want to say to me?" Noah asked, voice quiet but sharp. They exchanged glances. "Just talking, man. No offense meant." He held their gaze, jaw tight. "You don't know her, and you sure as hell don't know me." The room went still. He paid for his things in silence, each beep of the scanner landing like a slap. Back outside, the cold didn't sting, it burned. His pride swelled hot in his chest, tangled with something sharper. Doubt. Fear, not of them, not really, but of the idea that maybe they weren't completely wrong. He didn't want a handout. He didn't want to be pitied. And if she was just passing time with him, he wasn't sure if he could survive being toyed with by someone who made him feel seen. The snow came fast. By noon, the sky had gone from gray to white, the kind of white that swallows everything, turns the world quiet and strange. Noah had been working on rewiring the exterior lanterns when the wind started whipping hard across the lawn. He didn't see Vivian until she came sprinting across the garden path in her boots and a long coat, her hair pinned back, cheeks flushed with cold. "You need to get inside," she called out over the wind. "I just need to finish—" Noah. She rarely used his name like that, direct, unapologetic. It stopped him mid-sentence. Then the wind knocked over the ladder, and he didn't argue again. They ducked into the tool shed at the edge of the property just as the snow came down in full sheets. The door slammed shut behind them with a bang. Inside, the light bulb above flickered, casting long shadows over the scattered tools, coils of wire, and half-organized bins. For a moment, they just stood there, catching their breath, listening to the storm rage against the walls. "Well," Vivian said, brushing snow from her coat, "I guess you're not invincible after all." He smirked. "I used to be. Then I turned 30 and pulled my back tying a boot." She laughed, genuine, unguarded. Then the silence that followed stretched a little too long. Noah leaned against the workbench, folding his arms. "You ever get tired of people thinking they know your life?" Vivian looked at him. "All the time. They've got opinions about us, around town." "I figured." He watched her closely. "You care?" Vivian hesitated. "I care what it might do to you, not them." He swallowed, the air thick. "They think you're toying with me, passing time with the poor guy in the shed while you wait for your real life to start back up." She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Then they don't know me either." Noah looked away, his voice low. "I don't want to be a chapter you forget about." "You're not," she said. "You're the part I didn't think I'd get to live." The wind howled through the cracks, rattling the glass, and in the silence that followed, something inside both of them finally stopped pretending. The storm passed by mourning, leaving everything blanketed in a thick hush. Snow clung to the trees like frosting and coated the rooftop of the cottage until it looked like something from a postcard. But inside the library, the fire crackled, and the silence between Noah and Vivian felt heavier than anything falling from the sky. They hadn't said much since the tool shed, not about what was said, not about what it stirred up. It sat between them like a book half opened, too delicate to turn the page. Vivian stood near the window now, one hand wrapped around a fresh mug of coffee, the other resting on the frame. Her shoulders were drawn in, tense in a way Noah hadn't seen before, like she was holding something in with effort. Noah watched her from the armchair. He didn't press. He never did. But after a long silence, she spoke. "I was engaged once," she said quietly, not turning from the window. The sentence landed like a match in a dark room. "He died 3 years ago," she continued. "Car accident. He was driving to meet me for dinner." Noah didn't move, didn't interrupt. "I was running late," she said, voice flat. "I'd gotten stuck in a meeting that didn't matter. We were arguing that week about something stupid. I don't even remember what. And I almost texted him to cancel, to say I'd see him tomorrow instead. But I didn't. I told him I'd be there soon." She paused, blinking back something Noah couldn't see. "He never made it. Black ice. Instant." The words hung in the air, raw and unvarnished. Noah sat forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Vivian turned from the window, her expression unreadable. The funeral was full of people who thought they knew him, knew us. But they didn't know how he made me laugh when I was angry, or how he used to leave notes under my pillow when I worked late. She looked at Noah, her eyes sharp now. "After he died, I stopped letting people get close, because it's easier to be alone than to feel that kind of loss again." Noah nodded slowly. "Until now?" She didn't answer, but she didn't look away. The night was still, heavy with the kind of quiet that only came after a storm. The snow outside sparkled beneath the moonlight like 1,000 secrets left untouched. Inside the estate, the fire in the library burned low, casting flickering gold against the walls. The air warm, but charged with something far more dangerous than cold. Vivian sat on the edge of the couch, one leg tucked beneath her hands wrapped around a second cup of tea she hadn't touched. Noah was across from her, close, but not close enough, elbows on his knees, watching the flames like they could tell him what to say. They hadn't spoken in minutes, but the silence between them didn't feel like absence. It felt like a held breath. Vivian broke first. "Do you ever wonder," she said, voice soft, "what your life would have been if just one thing had gone differently?" Noah looked at her, the firelight softening the edges of her face. Every day. Her lips parted like she wanted to say more, but instead she just nodded. A moment passed, and then she stood slowly, stepping toward him with hesitant grace, as if afraid the floor might give out. He didn't move. She stopped just in front of him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her skin, smell the faint trace of cinnamon on her sweater. Her eyes searched his. Quiet, open, vulnerable, in a way he wasn't sure she'd let herself be with anyone else. And then she leaned in. The space between them narrowed, like gravity was working harder than it should. Her hand brushed his cheek, fingertips soft but certain. He didn't breathe, didn't blink. Her lips were inches away, and for one suspended second, everything else vanished. The bills, the cold, the weight of who he'd been before this place. It was just her. But then, like a snapped branch in the woods, something in him pulled back. Noah stood too quickly, his breath sharp. "I can't." Vivian froze. "I don't belong here," he said, eyes cast down. "Not really. You know that." She said nothing, and as he turned and walked out of the library, the fire behind him hissed like it knew exactly what he'd just walked away from. The elementary school gymnasium smelled like pencil shavings, old linoleum, and anticipation. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of parents and relatives bundled in winter coats, fidgeting with programs printed on cheap copy paper. The stage was strung with construction paper snowflakes and a crooked banner that read "Winter Wonders" in red glitter glue. Noah sat in the middle row, third from the back, trying not to think about the fact that his flannel shirt had a missing button and his boots were still streaked with salt. But Lila was grinning from the stage curtain, a red felt elf hat slipping sideways on her head. That was all that mattered. He kept checking the door, out of habit more than hope. Vivian hadn't said anything after he left the library 2 nights ago. No text, no call, just silence. He hadn't expected anything different. That world and his didn't mix. He'd reminded himself of that 100 times. Still, part of him looked at every creak of the door like it might be her. The lights dimmed. A teacher shuffled on stage with a clipboard and a microphone that squealed once before settling into static silence. She welcomed the crowd with the usual enthusiasm, rattling off names and thanking the PTA. Then the curtains parted. Lila stepped into view, center stage, arms stretched wide. Her voice was small but sure as she recited her line about snowflakes being nature's confetti. The audience chuckled politely. Then he heard it. A laugh, familiar, full, warm. He turned. Vivian was there, standing quietly in the back by the door, dressed in a long black coat, snow still melting from her shoulders. Her eyes were locked on Lila, glowing with something deeper than polite interest. She clapped louder than anyone when Lila sang her solo, off-key and beaming. Noah couldn't move. He couldn't stop staring at her. After the final bow, Lila ran down the aisle, arms outstretched. She didn't stop at him. She darted past the chairs and threw herself straight into Vivian's arms. "You came!" Vivian hugged her tightly, eyes wet. "Of course I did." Noah stood there, watching them, something sharp and unspoken lodged in his chest. And for the first time since the night in the library, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong to walk away. The crash echoed louder than it should have. Noah had just stepped into the foyer, arms full of pine garland, when he heard it, a shattering sound, sharp and final. Then silence. Heavy, trembling silence. He rushed toward the parlor, heart already hammering in his chest. Lila was frozen in the middle of the room, shards of glass glittering at her feet like spilled stars. Her hands were clasped over her mouth, eyes wide with horror. The tree beside her leaned slightly to one side, and near its base was the broken ornament, what had once been a delicate, hand-blown swan, now a mosaic of fractured beauty. Vivian's voice came from behind him, soft, controlled. "That was my grandmother's." Noah's stomach dropped. I didn't mean to," Lila whispered, her voice cracking. "I just wanted to see it up close. I didn't know it was real." Vivian stepped into the room, slowly, her eyes locked on the broken pieces. Noah bent down immediately, hands trembling, as he began gathering the shards. "I'll pay for it. I'll replace it." "You can't replace it," she said gently. "I'll cover it somehow, or I'll work extra hours, or—" He swallowed, standing to face her. "Maybe it's best if we go. I didn't bring her here to break your things." Vivian looked at him, stunned. "You think I care more about glass than her?" He blinked. "She's a child, Noah. She made a mistake, and you're ready to tear up everything we've built over it?" "It's not about the ornament," he said, his voice rough. "It's about boundaries. Respect. I should have been watching her. I've already taken more from you than I should have." Vivian stepped forward, lowering her voice. "You think being here is some kind of debt? That you're walking through this house on borrowed time?" He didn't answer. She looked past him at Lila, still frozen, tears welling in her eyes. Vivian knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. "Accidents happen, sweetheart. It's just a thing." Lila sniffled. "I didn't want to break anything. I wanted to help decorate." Vivian smiled. "Then you'll help me fix it." Noah stood there, guilt thick in his throat. But Vivian didn't look at him with disappointment. She looked at him like she was waiting for him to finally see what she already knew, that he didn't owe her an apology. He belonged. The grand hall sparkled with chandeliers and soft jazz, the kind of warm glow that made everything feel polished, effortless, timeless. The annual Hartwell Christmas Gala wasn't just a party. It was a legacy. Wine flowed, laughter echoed, and the air was thick with expensive perfume and quiet judgment. Noah stood near the back, uncomfortable in a suit borrowed from a tailor Vivian insisted on sending. He tugged at the collar for the third time in a minute, watching Lila twirl in her new dress, a soft green velvet number Vivian had picked out herself. She looked radiant, alive, unburdened, and he felt like a man who'd stepped into someone else's dream. It didn't help that the murmurs had started early. Whispered comments, curious glances, the two perfect smiles from guests who looked through him like he was furniture. He could feel the weight of it, pressing at the edges of his pride. One woman leaned toward another near the hors d'oeuvres table. "She's always had a soft spot for strays, hasn't she?" He turned his head, jaw clenched. Vivian noticed. She was across the room, mid-conversation with a board member, but the shift in Noah's expression was enough. She excused herself quietly and crossed the floor, her heels silent against the marble. And then she did something he didn't expect. She took his hand, gently, firmly, like she was making a statement. The room fell quieter, not silent but close. Vivian stepped up to the small dais at the front, where a microphone had been waiting for the evening toast. She didn't clink her glass. She didn't wait for the room to fully hush. She just began. "Some of you have questions," she said calmly, scanning the room. "I've heard the whispers. I always do." A few people stiffened. She continued, "Let me answer them. Noah is not a guest. Lila is not a visitor. They are not here because of pity or curiosity or temporary kindness. They are here because they are part of this home. They are family. And if anyone in this room can't accept that, there's the door." Silence. Then a few claps. Then more. Noah stood frozen, heart thudding, hand still in hers, and in that moment beneath the golden lights and the unblinking eyes of old money and new power, he didn't feel small, he felt chosen. The study door closed with a soft but deliberate click. Vivian barely had time to turn before her brother's voice cut through the room like a blade. "What are you doing, Vivian?" He stood by the fireplace, tailored suit immaculate, whiskey in hand, eyes cold in a way that didn't match the warmth of the holiday glow behind him. Harrison Hartwell had always been composed, but this was something else. There was venom now, sharpened over years of control and image maintenance. She crossed her arms. "You'll have to be more specific." He took a slow sip. "The speech, the man, the girl. You really brought them to our event and paraded them around like some sentimental charity case?" She didn't flinch. "They're not charity, and this isn't your event. It's the Hartwell name on the invitations, the Hartwell reputation on the line. Or did you forget where this fortune came from while you were busy playing house with a mechanic?" Vivian felt the rage rising, but she kept her voice calm. "He has a name, Noah, and his daughter's name is Lila. They're good people." Harrison set his glass down with a thud. "They're not our people." Vivian stepped forward. "You mean they're not rich enough to be worth pretending to care about? Is that it?" His jaw tightened. "What I mean is that dragging our family into town gossip to play out your grieving process in public is beneath you. Say what you really mean, Harrison. You think I should have married someone like you, calculating, polished, emotionally bankrupt. You think loving someone without a portfolio makes me weak." He didn't answer. "I don't need your approval. I haven't for years." "Maybe not," he said, picking up a thick folder from the side table, "but you still need the boards. The trust fund language hasn't changed. Embarrass the family and the stipends can be reevaluated. You're skating close, Vivian." She stared at the folder, at the man she used to trust. Then she lifted her chin. "Then cut me off." His expression faltered. She walked to the door, her voice quiet but ironclad. "But understand this. Money never made me powerful. It made me quiet, and I'm done being quiet." She left him standing there, glass in hand, face pale with something dangerously close to fear. Noah found the letter by accident. He was cleaning the cottage after dinner, wiping down the small kitchen table, while Lila hummed softly in her room, her penguin tucked under one arm. The folded paper sat half-hidden beneath a stack of crayons and an empty mug of cocoa. He almost tossed it, thinking it was another doodle. Lila had taken to drawing trees and snowmen and stick figures with wild abandon lately, but the words "Dear Santa," scrawled in uneven red marker, stopped him. He sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath him, and opened it. "Dear Santa, I already have what I asked for last year. Daddy is with me, and I'm not cold anymore. We have lights on the tree and food that smells like movies. I know you're really busy, but I wanted to ask for something for someone else this time." Miss Vivian smiles like it's pretend, like she's trying to be okay for other people, but I think sometimes she's sad in a quiet way. "She made me soup when I was sick and gave me mittens that look like strawberries." She reads fast, but she listens slow. That's rare. I heard that in a book. Please let Miss Vivian be happy. And if you have time, tell her she's already magic. Love, Lila. Noah sat still, staring at the words until they blurred. He felt something crack inside, not in a painful way, but in that quiet collapse that happens when a wall you've held up too long finally falls. He didn't know how a child could see through layers of adult armor so easily, but she had. She always did. He folded the letter gently, hands trembling, and tucked it back where he found it. When he peeked into her room, she was asleep, one arm flung across the pillow, the penguin's head poking out from beneath the covers. He stood in the doorway for a long time, heart heavy and full all at once. Because in just a few sentences, his daughter had asked for the one thing he hadn't had the courage to want himself. Not money, not safety, just love. For someone who deserved it. Snow drifted down like a whisper, soft and slow, blanketing the world in silence. The estate looked like something from a painting, rooftops dusted white, the garden glazed in frost, every branch glittering beneath the pale light of morning. Vivian stood on the back terrace, coat unbuttoned, arms crossed tightly against the cold. The legal envelope lay open on the stone table beside her, its contents fluttering slightly in the wind. Pages of legacy, contracts, and control. Her name written in print that looked clean, final, and heavy. Harrison had delivered it himself earlier that morning. No yelling this time, no threats, just a statement. Sign the agreement, walk the line, and the trust remains intact. Refuse and the board would vote to suspend her rights to the estate's wealth. Legacy money, inherited power, gone in a single stroke. She could still hear his voice, calm and rehearsed. Think carefully. This isn't just about you anymore. He was wrong. It had never been about her. It was about what people expected her to be. The polite heiress, the smiling host, the poised, grieving widow who never asked for more than silence. And she was done. Noah approached quietly from the path behind the hedges, his boots crunching softly in the snow. He stopped when he saw her standing there, the wind catching strands of her hair, her eyes not on the papers but on the sky. "You all right?" he asked. Vivian turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "They want me to sign it," she said, "to stay within the lines, keep the name clean, and let them sleep at night." He hesitated. "And if you don't? They'll cut me off. Everything." His breath caught. "Vivian, I never wanted you to—" She held up a hand. "I'm not doing this for you." She stepped closer, snow catching in her lashes. "I'm doing this for me, because for the first time in my life, I'm not hiding behind a last name, and I'm not going to start now." Then she reached for the envelope and tore it straight down the middle. The sound echoed louder than the wind. And Noah, standing there in the snow, watching her let go of everything she was supposed to protect, realized he was falling for a woman who finally chose to be free, and chose him in the same breath. The storm had passed, but the wind still howled outside, pushing shadows against the windows of the estate. Inside the cottage, Noah sat at the small table, a screwdriver in one hand and a magnifying glass perched awkwardly between his brow. The music box lay open in front of him, delicate, half-rusted, its ballerina figure long broken off at the base. He handled it like something sacred, because to her it was. Vivian had mentioned it once, offhand during a quiet evening when the fire had burned low, and neither of them had much to say. She'd called it the only gift my mother ever picked out herself, said the melody. Claire de Lune used to put her to sleep when the world outside her door felt too big to control. Noah had found it later that week in one of the estate's old boxes, dusty, cracked, forgotten. He didn't know what made him take it, maybe because fixing things was how he made sense of the world. Maybe because part of him still didn't know how to say what he felt, so he used tools instead of words. By midnight, his fingers ached from the effort. The gears were stubborn, and the spring had to be replaced with a part from an old pocket watch. But when he turned the key this time, something clicked into place. A single fragile note rang out, then another, and slowly, haltingly, the tune began to play. Soft, unsteady, but there. The next day he found her in the reading room, curled into the window seat with a cup of tea in her hands. The stormlight still hung in the air, giving everything a quiet glow. He didn't say anything, just placed the box on the table beside her and stepped back. Vivian stared at it, her eyes flickering with recognition. Slowly she reached for the key and wound it. The melody creaked to life, each note trembling like it had waited years to be heard. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes filled, and in that silence, with nothing but old music filling the room, Noah realized that sometimes love didn't need a grand gesture. Sometimes it was a man with worn hands, fixing something that mattered. The snow had started to melt by the time Vivian asked him to meet her at the edge of the estate, near the old greenhouse that had been boarded up for years. The air still bit at their skin, but the sun was out, weak but present, painting long shadows on the ground. Noah approached cautiously, hands in his coat pockets, boots crunching on gravel. Vivian stood by the greenhouse door, her breath fogging in the cold, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She didn't look at him right away. She was staring at the building like she could already see what it would become. "I used to come here when I was a kid," she said, "hide behind the rose bushes and pretend I lived in a different house, one where people talked more and smiled without waiting for someone to leave the room." Noah stayed quiet. He knew that tone now, half memory, half confession. "They were going to tear it down," she continued. "I stopped them." He glanced up at the cracked windows and splintered door. "What are you planning?" Vivian turned to him, her expression unreadable. "A community outreach center, food pantry, job skills programs, mentorship for kids, especially the ones no one looks twice at." He blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely." She stepped closer, pulling a folder from beneath her coat. "I've already started the paperwork, but I don't want to just fund it. I want someone who understands what it means to walk into a place and not know if you belong." She held out the folder. "I want you to run it." Noah didn't take it. He just looked at her, stunned. "Vivian, You're not just good with tools, Noah," she said, her voice soft. "You're good with people. You see them, you listen, and more than that, they listen to you." His throat tightened. "You could hire someone with degrees, experience, a polished resume." She nodded. "I could, but I don't want someone who just looks right on paper. I want someone who's lived it, someone who knows how to rebuild more than buildings." He looked down at the folder, then back at her. "You're offering me a lot." "I'm offering you a future," she said, "and asking if you want to build it with me." This time, he didn't walk away. The cottage was quiet, wrapped in a thick hush that only Christmas morning could carry. Snow fell in soft sheets outside, blanketing the world in clean white silence. The tree, small, slightly crooked, glowed in the corner of the living room, its lights flickering gently against the dim gray light filtering through the windows. A single strand of popcorn garland sagged near the top where Lila's arms hadn't quite reached, and a paper star sat proudly at the crown. Noah sat on the edge of the couch, still in his flannel sleep pants and an old sweater with a tear at the collar, watching the fireplace crackle to life. The warmth from the flames rolled over the room slowly, chasing off the chill left by the night. Then, a patter of feet. Lila came sprinting out of her room, hair wild, eyes wide with joy. She didn't stop until she hit the living room rug, throwing herself to her knees in front of the tree with a gasp that made Noah smile despite himself. "Santa came," she whispered, reverent. She looked back at him, eyes glowing. He really came. A few modestly wrapped gifts waited under the tree: new socks, a stuffed rabbit to match her penguin, a pair of glittery pink boots Vivian had snuck in without telling him. Lila dove in without hesitation, tearing paper with abandon, laughing with that wild, full-hearted joy that only children know how to feel. Noah leaned back, watching her, and felt a wave of something wordless rise in his chest. Then Vivian appeared. She wore a soft cream sweater, her hair pulled back loosely, no makeup, no pretense, just her. A tray of coffee and cinnamon rolls in her hands, the smell instantly filling the room with warmth and something almost like home. She set the tray down and stood beside him, watching Lila unwrap a handmade necklace, her little fingers trembling with excitement. "She's happy," Vivian said softly. Noah looked up at her. "She really is." They turned to each other at the same time. No orchestration, no hesitation, just the gravity of weeks, of words unspoken and moments nearly missed. He reached up, she leaned down, and in front of the fireplace, with snow falling softly outside and Lila humming a Christmas tune to herself on the floor, they kissed, slow, certain, like they'd both finally come in from the cold.